Hello, class. So, chapter um, 6 on administrative agency. I'm sorry, I forgot what chapter we were starting on. So, I'm going to do a brief lecture on administrative agencies. Uh, Administrative agencies are special entities that are created by the legislative branch, which then to govern and legislate over particular issues. A typical legislative agency could be, for example, administrative agency could be the EPA. Okay, um, so from time to time, Congress comes across specific types of topics that require special expertise in creating rules and regulations. So instead of having to deal with them themselves, they pass legislation that gives the power to the executive branch and specifically creates an agency to govern those type of topics. So this type of delegation of power is kind of an odd thing to happen in our government, but it's been recognized as a constitutional act that the legislature does. Although there are definitely certain types of strains that are put on the different bodies, because it's an odd thing. The founders had passed the Constitution to have three types of branches: the executive, the legislative, and the judicial, where the the role of creating laws it's in the legislature. However, agencies, administrative agencies, are kind of done the exact opposite. We're asking the executive branch to create the laws and to enforce the laws, and to some extent even review the laws. Okay, and I'll talk about that a little bit. So it's a very odd entity in the U.S. government. There is a strain of thought that these are unconstitutional acts. However, the Supreme Court has recognized the ability for the legislative agency to do this. And the rationale is that it's still the act of legislating and enforcing law is still within one of the three branches. So the courts recognize it's a lawful authority. Very odd thing for our legal system and our constitutional system. But nevertheless, they're there. Um, just to get a little bit more detailed about it, some of the odd things are that the administrative agency is actually creating the rules. Okay, so EPA is creating environmental protection rules, and they're the authority that does that for the federal government. Okay, so and it doesn't require any oversight of the legislative branch from the perspective of the actual laws, and when there are issues that come up, they're even handled internally. There's a rule that requires that any disputes that happen in administrative agencies between the agencies and the citizens or other entities, that before you can take it to court, you have to exhaust all remedies within the administrative agencies, meaning you have to follow their policies and procedures and take your issue all the way through. Only at the end can you then take your case to court. So, very odd thing, because founders intended the courts to be the judicial branch, but yet in the agencies they're absorbing some of that role, if anything, preliminarily. So, very odd structure in the U.S. government, but it's there. It's recognized. It does work. It does seem to be efficient. Um, and in its own unique kind of way. If you were to look at the amount of laws that are passed by Congress and then the amount of laws that are passed by administrative agencies, the administrative agencies would dwarf the amount of laws that are passed by Congress by many folds. Um, and so there's an enormous amount of power in the agencies, and so there's always a watchful eye by the citizens and by other government branches. Um, so as you're reading through the chapter, definitely think about the legislative aspect of it, the executive aspect of it, because the executive branch is what's running these agencies. Although they do function in a lot of their own autonomy, meaning the actual agency doesn't necessarily take orders from the executive branch, from the president. So there is some ambiguity there as to who has authority to do what. The general thought is that the president does oversee the agencies and has a lot of influence. It appoints its cabinets to the agency, so that has power. Certainly has power in that way. But it's questionable as to how much direct order the president can give to within the agency. So take a look at those concepts in the chapter. Hopefully this discussion helps you understand it. It makes a lot more sense when you look at it from the context of an actual agency, let's say the EPA. And let me know if you have questions. Okay, well, thank you guys, and continue doing a good job.